Video 18C, real, true, educational, not fake news. Good night. It's Thursday the 5th of December 2019. It's seasonal, it's coldish, not freezing. There's snow in many parts of United States, and it's cold here too, but not too bad. A little bit damp. And I put my cattle in. I have a suckler herd. I put them into the shed anyway because it was getting too mucky to feed them out. So anyway, as I had the previous video 18B, this is 18C on the North-South Interconnector, and it got great views, great number of views. I want to thank you all very, very much. I think it got 6 likes, and that's good too. And don't forget to give it a fingers up if you think it's worth the effort I put into it, and if I'm fair to everyone in that. This video I'm going to look at the situation in Northern Ireland, because I ended the previous video by saying there is still hope, and all I can do is try and point out what the situation is at the minute, and where it might lead to, and what we might do. And there are a few things that needs to be said, and that is, I don't profess to be a genius in everything. I generally do think out stuff, and I do study. I put a lot of effort into studying, and I have a degree course in business studies, and I'm experienced in law and stuff like that, even though I'm not a lawyer. And I have to preface everything I say by saying that I can't take accountability for what I say and what I tell you, because if you hire a lawyer, they're the ones who have to have the insurance, not me. Having said that, I have had some success, and I always remember going up to the protest we had against the wind farms way back in 2011, I think it was, and I had been involved in fighting wind farms in the Irish Midlands. And a lady that came to me, and she said, you know, she says, I read you totally wrong. She says, I thought you were some kind of Ontario or devil going about trying to get looking for notice, and then I began to see where you were coming from with what you said. And she says, you're right about a lot of those legal points, and I wish I could had your knowledge of it and your ability to plead this in court. So I don't want praise, or I'm not looking for anything. I have one objective here, and that's to save my environment of my country. To save the Irish environment, the country that I have a lot of good time for. That's my objective. That's my ultimate aim. And one of the things here with the Rara wind farm, which I have to look out, if I look out the window here now, there's a big red light, and all this terrible intrusion on the visual landscape here before the start again, before the start to revolve that didn't go around yet. But one of the things is that they tried to get the cabling into the substation 5 kilometres away by means of an exempted development, and I saw red, and I fought them on that, and I won in a judicial review. And when they came along and got their last planning permission, one of the things that I had was niggling at me was a local lane, a lane that runs past my farm and on out to the Shercock Road. And they treat it as a farm track. And I have a full right of way, as has everybody else. I went up to school that lane. And it was improperly described. And the environmental impact statement says it should be properly described. And when I complained to Board Planola, they ignored it. And they put in conditions about road opening licences. And when Hardy came to Hardy, they did not include the lane in it. They wrote to me and said we didn't mean the lane. And so I failed to identify that they didn't deal with the use of the lane correctly. And at a meeting down in the Midlands a few weeks ago, a very experienced man from the west of Ireland warned them and advised them, you must go through the planning application with a fine-tooth comb, and you must know what you're doing. And this is totally different from the approach of some people and some groups in just bashing out with judicial reviews and bashing after politicians and chasing after. the very same politicians who want all this and who won't sleep at night if you beat them. It's a waste of time. And had I taken a judicial review and insisted proper attention be given to the lane, it was closed in February 2019, and it's still closed. I'd now be able to take a judicial review in Cavan Circuit Court under Section 164 of the Planning and Development Act and stop them putting in the cables because they didn't comply with it in relation to the lane. So I learn as I go along, and I regret that. In fact, I believe I probably would have stopped the wind farm had I taken that approach. Now, one thing I will say about myself is I don't make the same mistake twice. And I'm trying to advise people on how to approach planning and the best way to go about it. And it's probable too that if you went about it really intelligently, you'd block every single project. The government has already suggested amending the Planning and Development Act to stop the likes of me being an objector, and other people as well. But they can't do it because of European law. Can't do it. So they'll try it, no doubt, if they can get away with it. So we're now talking about the North-South Interconnector and what the options are. And one of the things I want to do in this video, depending on how long it goes, I'll try and keep it under the 20 minutes. One of the things I want to do is to explain to you exactly what the position is and what lies ahead. And hopefully you accept it and show you the documentary evidence for it on the screen of my computer. Now, the first thing to remember is that in the Republic of Ireland, planning is by the council, the county council, first off. And then it's to the appeal to Bord Pleanála. And Bord Pleanála is a planning appeals board. It's not a first instance board, it's a planning appeals board. But there are two circumstances in which it is the one and only planner. What would you call it? First instant planner. And that is under a strategic environmental directive, strategic environmental project. That's a local Irish thing, and that cuts out the local councils. And then there's the project of common interest, 2013 regulation. Now, a regulation must be introduced immediately. There's no transposition. It takes effect right across the EU. I think it's 347 of 2013. We won't go into it here. We might go into it again at another stage. Now, from the beginning of some wind farms and the North-South Interconnector, various individuals and groups challenged the right of the SID. In other words, they challenged the right to bypass the councils. Now, if you look at the North-South Interconnector, there was full of a lorry load of documentation. Unbelievable amount of documentation. I mean, there was about 4 tons of it. And to suggest that should go into Meath County Council, Cavan County Council and Monaghan County Council to a crowd of young women and men there who don't know much and admitted to me they hadn't a clue even what the EIA directive was, is a bit ridiculous. It's an unwieldy process. You couldn't go along with it, and you could have 2 councils refusing it and 1 council granting it. Be a mess. You can't really do that with something which transcends 3 counties on 3 planning authorities areas. So I disagreed with challenges on that. I think the right way is go direct to Bord Pleanála and then do it right there. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is now when we move into Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, it's not the same as in the Republic. In the Republic, you have an independent body on Bord Pleanála. In Northern Ireland, you have the minister at Stormont, the executive minister of the Stormont Assembly under devolved government, under the Good Friday Agreement and the Assembly in Northern Ireland. So the Minister for the Environment, presumably, is the granting or refusing authority. Now, you might say that's a bit political, but it doesn't really matter that much. It's just you're allowed to have different ways of doing it. He's supposed to do all the considerations. He's supposed to act in the best interest of the community, and he or she is elected. So, you can make a case either way. In any event, it doesn't matter. That's the law there, and I wouldn't get too annoyed about it. That's the law. Now, everyone seems to know what happened there. Funny enough, It was it was renewable energy that brought down the Stormont Assembly. The unionist people apparently were the forefront with cash for ash. You know what that was? They paid £1 for a quantity of wood chip imported from America to heat buildings, chicken houses, potato drying place, grain dryers and all that. And the grain only cost 60%. So they were heating tin air. Some sheds had nothing in them. They were just heating them with the windows open. And there was no real problem at the beginning. Sinn Féin didn't mind. So what about it? Sure, we'll stop it now and that's it. Until they discovered that the money was guaranteed for several years and they came out of the block grant from Westminster. They came out from the lump of money they get every year from Westminster. And so the money they wanted to spend on local schools and local hospitals and doing up roads and children's parks and playgrounds was all gone. And then Sinn Féin, who is as green a party as you'll get, they're a left-wing Green Party, pulled the plug. Martin McGuinness pulled the plug, God be good to him. He subsequently died. And brought down the Assembly, and it has never been got up since. Now, when the North-South Interconnector was granted in the Republic and the time for judicial reviews had expired in the Republic, and all judicial reviews, of which mine was the last, I was the last one, but the time expired and I lost and I didn't appeal because, number one, if you appeal right up to the European Court of Justice, you have to have legal representation in the European Court of Justice. You can't go in and plead on your own. And so I would need lawyers. And then you're into big trouble. They mightn't, however they get lawyers, they mightn't even know what I was pleading. So I couldn't go ahead. You could chance it on to the Court of Appeal here in Dublin, the Supreme Court. I don't really know. I thought about it long and hard and I didn't go ahead. There was a few flaws in my statement of grounds. One was I made it a bit too wide. I covered too much in it and I made a few errors. But the principles there was right. And Judge Max Barrett, as I said, ruled that Borgclonollo was only a clearinghouse. Now, he recently ruled that a person applying for naturalisation to be an Irish citizen in the Republic has to stay in the country for a full year before he's granted citizenship. And that meant they couldn't go home to a funeral or even take a day off or even go to Newry shopping. And that decision was overturned by the Supreme Court in the last week. They said that's ridiculous, that'd be absurd, that you couldn't go to Newry. So he lost on that. His ruling was overturned. But anyway, maybe in the future I would take some case which will not be going to Europe and fight it right through. I'd love to do that. It's great crack taking a court case as a lay litigant, but they don't want to see it coming. The judges don't want to see it coming. But if you have everything right and nice and concise and done right, you can win. You can definitely win. And I won one already with the wind farm here. So the thing about it is then when my case was over, the Northern Ireland had to deal with the northern section. And that runs from around Cady there, or right up to Tyrolene in County Tyrone. Now, there's only a little bit of it in County Tyrone. I presume there's a bit of resistance there too, but the bulk of it in Northern Ireland runs through County Armagh, up to the western side of Armagh City and on up that way. So they had to deal with. Now, bear in mind, the law said the minister had to grant it, but there was no minister. So another secretary, a senior secretary of the department, took it upon him or herself to grant it, the pylons. But they also granted an incinerator or some other thing. I think it was an incinerator as well, roughly around the same time. And the people fighting the incinerator took a judicial review. I don't know who the lawyers were. And the Armagh group, pylon group, took a judicial review. Now, they had a few cases there, but one of them was that the secretary could not grant permission in the absence of the minister because there was no legislation to entitle it. Now, under the devolved government system, there's a lot of leeway there. The British government moves in and out. If the Assembly's running, it's doing the government. If it falls, the British government does it. And every time the assembly falls, the British government has to bring in a little act to put power back into the British government, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, effectively, or whoever they appoint. And so you can do that to be in those circumstances. So what happened there then was that the Secretary granted it, and both the Northern Ireland group and the incinerator group, the other group, took a judicial review, and both had other grounds, but both were on the fact that the Secretary did not have the power, that she acted ultra vires, beyond his or her power to do so. That was some lucky break for the Northern group, because had they not put that ground on, the other project, the incinerator thing, would have won the judicial review and had the planning granted, and the Northern group could win nothing because they wouldn't have had their grounds in. You have to appeal within a certain time. You have to take your judicial review between, I think it's 8 weeks. So by the time the decision on the first group was given, it would be too late to go back in. But luckily enough, they had this covered. Fair play to them. They had this covered. And the next thing was the judge in Northern Ireland ruling on the incinerator thing, or whatever it was. I have to apologise for not studying exactly what it was. I think it was an incinerator. But it was a similar project to the pylons. So the judge said there's no legislation, and he can make the law under English common law, and that applies in Ireland too. But they can only make law up to a certain limit. They can't invent laws that don't exist. And he said, I'd be pushing it too far. I cannot allow this to happen. You'll have to go back and do it again and get a minister or some other system. So I hope you understand that now at 16 minutes what happened. When the first judicial review succeeded, the judge then just automatically granted for the pylons as well. Okay, so that's where it sits. It's quashed. And now the situation is, and you can think of this yourself as we go along, how would you handle that? Bearing in mind the British government wants this. The British government is still, as of today, the 5th of December 2019, a member of the EU. And so everyone wanted this, so how are they going to get round this? Well, the quashing took place in August 2019. Sorry, 2018. The quashing was 2018. And so the whole thing was up in the air. So that's what happened. That's the historical situation. Now the next thing was that on the 28th of November 2018, the British government introduced the Northern Ireland Executive Functions Order 2018. And I'm going to put them on the computer here, and I'll pause my camera. Now I'm not going to let this run, and I'm just thinking here whether I should end here now and have a new video then on the screen here of what happened. Do you know, I think I will, because too long of videos are not a good thing. So the first thing now I ask you to do is just understand what has happened up to date. The Secretary granted the planning permission for the northern part of the pylons. Two judicial reviews were taken. The first one wasn't the pylons, but it won because the court ruled that there was no legislation to enable a secretary or senior secretary or officer to act in lieu of the actual minister. Even though it was kind of assumed that that law existed, it didn't exist, and the judge quashed all. And the next thing was the British government lost no time in trying to fix this situation. And in the next video, folks, I'm not going to show it to you here. I'm going to show you what they actually did and move along in that way, because this is 18 minutes. So I hope that helps. Now you may say, oh, you're telling me what I already know already. Look, if we're going to beat this, we have to get it right. If the student is studying any of this, they have to listen. And I know people maybe feel a bit bored, but I did get a lot of views for the last one, and I hope this will set it out. This is right. The next video now, I'm going to show you the actual regulations and everything that apply. And I might then venture into how I would go about beating the North-South Interconnector. And I might as well use a half a minute of this. Remember again, your goal is essential. You have to decide what you want. What I believe the right way to go about is win strong to stop the whole, anything you can. If you have to bring the interconnector down and everything else, so be it. If you have to stop shipping into Belfast Lock, so be it. That's their problem. That's their problem. They're the ones foisting this on us. There's no place in this for niceties or how our poor wee politicians think or anybody else. And so at 20 minutes, we'll sign off there, and I'll be back. I might do this video right away now, and we'll be back then to bring you up to speed on what's happening there. So that'll do. Thank you very much, and we'll be back then with the next video. It'll be 18 BCD, 18D I presume, and I'll get that done right away. So thank you very much.